Hi there, and welcome to the Blue Team's PME design concept for Space University and Space Force professional military education. This was the team that focused really on building on things that exist in our best practices in the Air Force and the joint PME community. Next slide, please. So as we looked at existing best practices, existing models, really we felt that for Space Force to be able to have what it desires, which is an education forward service, there are a few core tenets. Really, that was breaking our learning out into 3 different milestones: continuous, which is ongoing throughout the Guardian's career; milestone, which happens at a few key points; and selective, which remains in for distinguishing performance and giving a reward for those top performers who the force thinks are worth investing some extra education in. We also think that having Space University as a physical location to be the heart of the force's education is essential. We're also going to walk you through a little vignette of what that looks like and talk about some additional information for the path forward. Next slide, please. So this graphic really shows that for all Guardians, officer, enlisted, and civilian, learning is a career-long foundational value. So we believe that continuous learning happens throughout one's career, from the very first day to the very last. And then there are additional milestones that we have for those Guardians, as well as continued opportunities for selective education, where members go to an additional school fellowship, et cetera, in residence. Next slide, please. So when we talk about continuous education, right, that is really based on a lot of factors, what a Guardian is doing in terms of their job, their training, how much responsibility they have. So it's not consistent, but there will be basic requirements that have to be met at every phase of a Guardian's career, as well as the opportunity for electives that can help match their interests or perhaps prepare them for a future job that they desire. And it is not upward limited. So while there are minimums, there's no maximum for a Guardian. Next slide, please. And then for milestone education, there's really those 4 steps that we see it happening. Entry, which is that top off, so that a Guardian can, as they use an Air Force commissioning or basic military training source, that they also get this top off of Space Force specific education that kickstart their careers. Primary, which is largely like the Airman Leadership School or Squadron Officer School model, and then intermediate and senior, that are those IDE, SDE, or NCOA, senior NCOA equivalents. Really the big change that we're making here is we believe that because milestone education is essential, that every Guardian needs to have dedicated time to accomplish those things, and they won't be additional duty nights and weekends type items. But really, those are the core tenets. And now I'm going to pass it off to Dr. Andrea Harrington to dive in a little bit more to our selective education.
Thanks very much. So we believe that it's really important that Guardian education involve a selective education opportunity for top performers at the IDE and SDE level that is similar to the PME opportunities offered by our sister services. That means that it needs JPME accreditation, and it also needs to offer a master's degree with an experienced expert civilian faculty. We have already built that civilian faculty for US Space Force over the course of the last couple of years, and we can utilize their expertise in the elements of national space power and the implementation of military space power in helping to educate our warfighters at the operational and strategic level, with a focus on the operational level at the IDE level and the strategic level at the SDE level. We're looking at a brick and mortar space defense college combining both the IDE and SDE, so you'd have one institution with one faculty with 2 separate sets of curricula for those 2 programs, very similar to the Naval War College model. And we would also be able to utilize that faculty to supervise and help select fellowship opportunities and AAD opportunities as well, and ultimately add on a USSF tailored advanced studies group like SAS. For our location, we do think we need to have a brick and mortar space university. We can start that out with the Space Defense College as one element of that, but we believe we need a partnership with a civilian university as the optimal way to achieve our objectives based on the existing infrastructure, library and other resources, registrar resources, possibly lab space that are available at those universities, and that we should be looking for a partner university that meets our location needs, but that also has an existing expertise and focus in areas of space curriculum, such as STEM and also the social sciences that will tie in with our military operational art and science for the PME schools. Okay, over to you, Knuckles.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Harrington. So now I'm going to walk through the career of Jane Smith, Space Force Guardian. What I really want to focus on are the three top rows: training, education, and job, to be able to demonstrate the deconfliction between those responsibilities. So when Jane Smith first joins the Space Force, she enters her entry level education with both enlisted members and civilians to be able to get the space home economics, learn the goals, the ideals, the values of our institution, as well as help chart her on the career that she's looking for. She attends her first training opportunities and then gets to her first unit, the 1st Space Operations Squadron, where she still hasn't started her continuous education, because through training and through their initial operational experience, we want our Guardians to be able to focus on becoming the best Guardian, the best operator, the best intel analyst they can be. At a certain point in their career, she decides, okay, it's time for me to start my continuous education requirements. She initially starts off with core concepts, which are focused on space power, the other space power disciplines, and USSF job disciplines that she can focus on, that she'll work with. And then she continues her career through her staff and instructor time. Next slide. She decides, hey, I really enjoy this operations thing. She attends weapons school to really hone her operational skills, gets PCS to our next unit, and after a stint through learning her new mission system, she decides, okay, now I want to start my continuous education again. This time she's going to steep herself in space power. So she really enjoys operations. She loves space. She wants to learn space power theory, doctrine, and just the history behind it. During this period, also in her second unit, is when she's going to attend her primary level to kind of get a rebluing, a re-space forcing, and look a little bit more in depth into space power theory with her peers. At a certain point, she transitions to the operational level of war. She gets more IQT, where there's another deconfliction, and now she decides to focus her continuous education on regional affairs. She wants to become an expert in the Indo-PACOM theater, so to add into her space power disciplines, she's now putting those arrows in her quiver. Next slide. At a certain point, Jane Smith was competitive enough to go to Space Defense College and residence. She also did a year afterwards at an advanced studies group that the USSF will eventually look to stand up. And due to those skills, she was selected to go be on the joint staff as a space strategist in the J5. During this time, she recognizes, okay, my next career step is going to be a squadron commander. So she starts focusing her continuous education on skill sets that will benefit her there, such as mentoring, communication, leadership. Next slide. During her squadron command tour, while she's performing that as her primary duty, she decides to shift her continuous education focus once again to joint processes, looking forward into her next job. She's selected to go to SDE, where instead of going to the Space Defense College, she seeks out a policy-focused fellowship. And then she follows that on with another combatant command tour at US Spacecom J5. At this point, she decides that 20 years is enough for her career and that she's going to punch. So she starts to focus her continuous education on skill sets that she thinks will benefit her on the outside world. So I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Harrington to just focus on the path forward.
Thank you very much. So just to sum up where we think we're moving from here, we believe the first step would be to separate out the IDE and SDE schools into a space defense college that's separate from US Air Force PME. And that can happen as a first step because we already have the assets that are in place for that move. We currently have students that are sister services, as well as US government civilians and international officers. We'd like to expand that as well to include contractors and commercial partners in line with the guidance from the CSO. Once we have been able to do that, we can focus more heavily on the stand-up of the brick and mortar Space University overall, finding that physical location and an ideal partner for that development, and continuing to then build out the other components of our education experience, so the entry-level education and the continuous education elements as well. Ultimately, we'd like to be able to develop that ASG at the end and put together an annual education symposium that will give the opportunity for both virtual learning students and in-resident students to be able to attend a symposium, along with faculty from other PME institutions who might want to learn more. Our essential components that cannot be missed are the brick and mortar Space University, the IDE and SDE schools, and the continuous learning model. Thank you very much, and please let us know if you have any questions.